Shavua Tov, Gute Woch. I want to tell story number 16 of the Shibchei Baal Shem Tov. It is story number 16 in the printed versions of the book. In the original manuscript was story number 2. Why the discrepancy? I'll explain in the notes, as well as all the other things that require explanation in this story. In the blog, in the Patreon link below. The story is called Tchilas HaIsgalus, the beginning of the revelation of the Baal Shem Tov. This story is narrated by the author of the Shibchei Baal Shem Tov. The source of these stories I'm telling of the Baal Shem Tov, Rav Dover of Linitz, and whenever he makes a reference to his father-in-law, means Rav Alexander Shochet, of whom we told the story last week, who worked as a sofer, as a traditional Jewish scribe for the Baal Shem Tov. And now, says Rav Dover, I will tell the greatness, the marvels that I heard from my father-in-law, may he rest in peace. How was the Isgalus, the revelation of the Baal Shem Tov? The Baal Shem Tov had settled in a small village and managed a sheinik. Sheinik is a tavern. And there he would take to his wife the moshke, the alcoholic drinks that she would use for the customers in the pub, in the tavern. And then, after bringing it to her, the Baal Shem Tov would go to his reclusion in a place at the other side of the Prut River. I'll also have to explain exactly where that is, modern day in western Ukraine. And there was a mountain, and the mountain there was a rock with an opening that was used as a small house, as if it was carved into the stone. There was this place. There the Baal Shem Tov would go with one loaf of bread and spend there the entire week. That was his food for the entire week, one loaf of bread. He'd basically be fasting most of the time and praying and doing his special meditations and spiritual preparations. But for the holiday of Shabbat, of Shabbos, he would come home. The Baal Shem Tov's brother-in-law, Rav Gershon of Kitov, he held the Baal Shem Tov as an ignoramus and a damned person, and he tried to influence his sister to leave him, to divorce him, because he didn't know about who the Baal Shem Tov was and all of this, but she did. She would just not reveal it to anyone. She kept the secret. Then, once the Baal Shem Tov came to the city of Brody, and there was a crazy woman. Actually, I don't know for sure, but by the context, I think it's the city of Brody. And there was a woman who was possessed by a spirit, what we call it dibuk, a spirit from outside that had a pendant, a suffering soul that had attached himself to this woman, and was making her act in a very strange way, and they would call her a crazy woman because of that. So what this woman was doing is she was looking at people and reading into them and telling them what they were, their special virtues and their big defects, and she would believe that she was kind of a seer. So Rab Gershon asked that the Rav Chassid, the pious rabbi, the Av Bezdin, the head of the Bezdin of Kitov, the Rav, the Mao, the great luminary, Moreino Moshe, of whom we've also mentioned in a story before, that he should tell the Baal Shem Tov to this crazy woman. Maybe she would get some musar into him and make him come into his senses. It's kind of upside down on how things end up being, but this is what Rav Gershon has in mind. And people complained. Rav Moshe and the pious men of Kitov took the Baal Shem Tov and went to the place where this woman was. And the Rav of the community of Kitov, meaning Rav Gershon, was the first one to come see her. The crazy woman sees Rav Moshe enters. Rav Moshe, she stood up and she said, Baruch haba, Kadosh B'Toer, blessed be, welcome be you, holy and pure man. Let's see who Rav Moshe is. And then to each one she would say that. The Spirit through her, the Spirit in her would speak and tell people who they are. When the Baal Shem Tov came, she stood up and said, Baruch haba Rav Israel. He was still, literally soft in years. He was still very young. So she didn't give lots of titles, but recognized Rav Israel. And then the Spirit starts talking to the Baal Shem Tov and says, do you think I am afraid of you? I know that you have an oath to heaven, that you cannot use the holy names of Hashem in your Kabbalistic formulas until you are 36 years old. And without that, you cannot do anything to me. The Baal Shem Tov was extremely humble and didn't want this to be known, that he is a tzaddik nistar, as a hidden tzaddik. So the other people that had came to the woman and asked her, what are you saying? And she would repeat her words. So the Baal Shem Tov came in, interrupted, and said, if you do not keep silent, said to the Spirit in the woman, I am going to sit here a Besdin. They are going to relieve me from the oath, and I'm going to kick you out of this woman. So the woman, the Spirit in the woman took it seriously, and he said, okay, I'll keep quiet. But the pious men of Kitov, they were tzaddikim themselves, they start telling the Baal Shem Tov, okay, we'll set a Besdin, we'll release you from the oath and you'll be able to kick out the Spirit. And the Baal Shem Tov says to them, don't allow me to use these names because it's very dangerous. Don't let me go into this. So he turns to the woman and says, the Baal Shem Tov says to the woman, to the Spirit in the woman rather, he's speaking in male sense, so he's speaking to the Spirit. Look what you have caused. Now I'm going to give you a piece of advice as a Baal Shem Tov. I want you to leave this woman. Leave her in good terms. And if you follow my advice, we are going to learn Torah in your behalf, and your soul will go up to heaven. You'll have a merit to not to have to be suffering and doing penance in this world. Then the Baal Shem Tov asked the Ruach, the Spirit, what is his name? The Ruach couldn't reveal it in public, and he said, if the people here leave, if you're alone, I'll tell you. I don't want my children who are alive and in this city to be embarrassed, to be dishonored by me telling you. And so everyone but the Baal Shem Tov left, and the Spirit, the Ruach, revealed to the Baal Shem Tov, the Dibuk, revealed to the Baal Shem Tov who he had been in life. Rav Dover says, my father-in-law, may he rest in peace, also knew who he was, who that person had been. So it was a soul that confessed. He had mocked the pious men of Kitov, the Hasidim of Kitov. Hasidim here doesn't mean followers of the Baal Shem Tov yet, it just means a pious man. The Spirit, the Ruach, the Dibuk accepted the Baal Shem Tov's deal, and he left the woman for good, in good terms. Like, okay, I'm not going to fight, don't have to bring here the holy names and do something on me, I'll leave. Then on, the Baal Shem Tov was no longer allowed to live in the town. That was it. But a Mochsan, a Jewish tax collector, hired him to be a melamed for his children. And it was then that the the father-in-law of Rav Dober, meaning Rav Alexander, was hired to be a melamed, sofer for the Baal Shem Tov. That means that the Baal Shem Tov was already beginning to do his things as a Baal Shem. He needed a sofer to write down his Kmeos. And the Melamed, not the Melamed, the Mochsan, the Jewish tax collector, gave the Baal Shem Tov a house that nobody wanted to live in it because it had spirits in it, had ruach. It was like a haunted house. The Baal Shem Tov took the house and put all the chitzonim, this outward spirits. I'll have to explain what it means in the link. Hamad and Itzlan, all of them took them to the attic of the house, and when they would come and mock the Baal Shem Tov like they do, start with their things, the Baal Shem Tov told them to be quiet and put them back in the attic. That's it. So Baal Shem Tov took on that house. There was also a case in which the town had a big drought. Sorry, I don't do recordings in a studio, but in the living room of my house, and sometimes we have street noises. So there was a big drought in the town where the Baal Shem Tov lived, and the Gentiles, the non-Jews of the town, took out all their effigies and did a big procession in the streets with their images, and they prayed for rain, and nothing happened. Then the Baal Shem Tov told the person who hired him, the Jewish tax collector, to gather Jews from all around the village, from other places around, to try to put together a minyan. And then the Baal Shem Tov would decree a fast, tanis. So it's a fast, they would have a minyan, the Baal Shem Tov would pray in an extended way, berichus, in a long, special dedicated prayer. And a non-Jew saw what's going on and asked the Jewish tax collector, "What are you guys doing? You're praying so long and with such you're crying when you're praying. What's going on?" The Mochsan, the Jewish tax collector, answered with the truth. He said, "We're asking for rain." So the Gentile starts laughing, starts, joking and saying, "Look, we did our big procession with all our images and nothing happens, and you think your prayers will be heard?" The Mochsan told this to the Baal Shem Tov, and the Baal Shem Tov said, replied to him, tell him that today will rain. And indeed, that was the answer to the Gentile, and that's what happened, it rained. After this, the Baal Shem Tov went to live in the community of Tlust, and there he also worked as a melamed, and couldn't even gather a minyan to pray in his house. But whomever it was, all the Jews that were around, even if not a minyan, he would gather, he would pray with them, and he would be wearing a tuzlik of kumayin, a short woolen coat, and the toes of his feet would come out in the holes of his shoes, because the Baal Shem Tov was a very poor man at the time. But he would go to mikveh every morning before the prayers, before the tefillah, and even the month of Tevet, that was the coldest, he would go to mikveh when it was really cold, and he would come to shul, and they would see him sweating big, thick tears of drops of sweat, big as peas, big as pulling, they call it, this type of legumes, huge. He was sweating of heat, even though it was the coldest moment. At the time they began bringing the Baal Shem Tov sick people for him to heal them, he didn't want to receive them. They brought him a crazy man or a woman, and he didn't want to. So somebody came to the Baal Shem Tov and told him that night, "You are 36. The Baal Shem Tov did a cheshbon account, and he said, yes, means his 36th birthday. He was 36. By the way, on the 18th day of Elul, which is this week, we will have the Baal Shem Tov's birthday. Chai Elul. Also the Alter Rebbe's birthday Sunday. So, as the Baal Shem Tov realized that he was already 36 and he was able to use the holy names of Hashem in the Kabbalistic things, he accepted the patient and he cured him through these miraculous ways. And then he stopped being a melamed, stopped being a children's teacher, and he just started serving as full-time Baal Shem and hired Rabbi Alexander as a sofer. So that's the moment he does it. When Rabbi Alexander, when he starts working as a Baal Shem, makes sense, and people start coming to him from all places. Now he's the beginning of established Baal Shem. Please, after this long story, share it, give it a like, tell your friends, tell Baal Shem Tov stories. And we all want to see this in translation, in written form. There are English translations of the book, but I am working in the first translation to Spanish. A donation in the Patreon will help me not only keep the stories going, but the work on the translation of the book and its edition and publishing. So I'll appreciate all collaborations there. Shavua Tov, Gute Woche.